You ever had that feeling, that someone is watching you, even when you're completely alone? Not once. Not just in a moment. But again, and again, and again. It doesn't hit you all at once. It doesn't come in strong. It shows up quietly. Subtle. Barely noticeable at first. A small shift. A slight tension. A moment where you adjust, before anything actually happens. You don't stop and question it. You don't pause and ask, why did I just react like that? You just move. You adjust. You continue. And that's what makes it easy to ignore. Because it doesn't interrupt you. It blends in. It becomes part of how you move through things. Part of how you respond. Part of how you exist in a moment, without realizing anything changed. Most people ignore this feeling. They distract themselves. They move on. They tell themselves it's nothing. Just a thought. Just a passing sensation. Just something that will go away. But it doesn't. Not really. It just becomes quieter. More familiar. Less noticeable. Until it stops feeling like something separate. And starts feeling like you. At some point, you stopped questioning it. Not because you understood it. Not because you chose it. But because it became familiar enough, to stop noticing. That's the shift. Not when it starts. When it disappears from awareness. You sit there. And now you can see it more clearly. Not as a thought. Not as a feeling. But as a pattern. In the way you react. The way you hesitate. The way you pull back, before something even has the chance to happen. It's small. But it's consistent. You don't fully step into things. You hold something back. Just enough to stay safe. Just enough to stay in control. And it happens fast. Too fast to question. Too automatic to notice. So it doesn't feel like a reaction anymore. It feels like instinct. Like this is just how you are. Like this is just how your mind works. The way you interpret things, slightly differently than they actually are. Not completely wrong. Just, shifted. A tone feels heavier than it is. A pause feels more intentional than it was. A delay feels like something behind it. Something you need to account for. So you adjust. Before anything confirms it. Before anything becomes clear. Before anything actually happens. And that adjustment feels natural. Because it's immediate. Because it's familiar. Because it's been there long enough to feel like default. You sit there. And now the pattern deepens. None of this feels like something that formed. It feels like something that has always been there. Always been part of you. Always been how you move through things. How you respond. How you think. And when something feels like that long enough, you stop looking at it. You stop asking where it came from. You stop seeing it as something that developed. Something that changed over time. You just accept it. As something fixed. Something stable. Something that defines you. And that's where the distortion begins. Because at the beginning, it wasn't you. It was a response. To something specific. A moment. A situation. A pattern that required you to adjust. Something didn't sit right. Something forced you to react differently. To protect yourself. To stabilize something. To make sense of something that didn't make sense. So you changed. Slightly. Not dramatically. Not in a way that stood out. Just enough. You changed how you responded. You changed how you interpreted things. You changed how much you allowed yourself to feel. And that adjustment worked. That's the part that matters. Because if it didn't work, you wouldn't have kept it. But it did. It reduced something. It controlled something. It made things easier to handle. So you kept it. Not consciously. Not intentionally. Just naturally. Because it helped. Because it made sense. Because it felt like the best way to deal with it. You sit there. And now you can see the next step. You used it again. Not in the exact same situation. But in something close. Something similar enough, that your system recognized it. And responded the same way. And again. And again. And again. Not because you decided to. Because it worked before. And that's how it builds. Not all at once. Not in one clear moment. But through repetition. Small. Quiet. Consistent. Until something that was once a response, becomes a pattern. And patterns don't feel like responses. They feel automatic. And automatic doesn't get questioned. Because it happens before awareness. Before you even notice. Before you even think about it. So now, you're not choosing it. You're running it. And that's where this chapter closes. Not with an answer. With a shift. You're not reacting in the moment. You're repeating something that already worked once. And you've repeated it enough times, that it no longer feels like something you do. It feels like something you are. At the beginning, it was just a response. Something specific happened. Something didn't feel right. Something required you to adjust. So you did. You reacted differently. You interpreted things differently. You held something back. Or moved more carefully. Or read situations with a little more caution than before. And at that moment, it made sense. It wasn't random. It wasn't irrational. It was functional. It helped you deal with something. It helped you stabilize something. It reduced uncertainty. It gave you a way to move through a situation that didn't feel stable. And because it worked, you kept it. Not consciously. Not as a decision. You didn't stop and say, this is who I'm going to be now. You just used it again. The next time something felt similar. The next time something triggered that same pattern. The next time your system recognized a situation that looked close enough. And that's where repetition begins. Not with intention. With recognition. Your system sees something familiar, and responds the same way. You sit there. And now the pattern becomes clearer. It wasn't copied exactly. It didn't require the same situation. Just something similar enough. Something that felt like it could lead to the same kind of outcome. And that was enough. So the response repeats. Again. And again. And again. Not because you're choosing it. Because it's available. Because it worked before. Because your system knows it. And over time, something shifts. Not in what the response does. In how it feels. At first, it feels like a reaction. Something you're doing in response to what's happening. Then, it starts to feel easier. More immediate. Less deliberate. You don't have to think about it. It just happens. And that's where repetition becomes default. That line matters. Because default doesn't feel like a response. Default feels like baseline. Like this is just where you start from. Like this is just how your system works. You sit there. And now the next shift becomes undeniable. When something becomes default, you stop comparing it. You stop asking, is this different from how I used to be? Is this something I learned? Is this something that formed over time? You don't think like that. Because default feels original. It feels like it was. Always there. And that's where the distortion deepens. Because now, you're not seeing the repetition anymore. You're only seeing the result. The behavior. The reaction. The interpretation. The hesitation. The adjustment. All of it feels immediate. Natural. Yours. You lean back slightly. And the next layer settles in. Default feels like you. That's the moment where everything changes. Because once something feels like you stop questioning it. You don't analyze it. You don't step outside of it. You don't look at it as something separate. You operate from it. Without realizing you are. You sit there. And now the structure becomes clearer. It didn't become you all at once. There wasn't a moment where you changed. There wasn't a clear shift. It built gradually. Through repetition. Through consistency. Through being used again and again without interruption. And that's what gives it weight. Because consistency feels like truth. If something shows up the same way over and over again, it must be real. It must be part of you. It must be something fundamental. But that's not what consistency means. Consistency doesn't mean origin. It means repetition. That line cuts clean. Because it breaks the assumption that what feels stable must be inherent. What feels stable might just be practiced. Reinforced. Repeated enough times that it no longer feels like something you learned. You lean forward slightly. And the mechanism sharpens. Every repetition removes friction. Every repetition reduces awareness. Every repetition makes it faster. Cleaner. More automatic. Until it no longer feels like a step. It feels like the starting point. You don't go into it. You begin from it. You sit there. And now the identity layer starts to form. Because once something is default, and once default feels natural, the next step is almost inevitable. It becomes identity. Not because it is. Because it's uninterrupted. You don't see alternatives. You don't see variation. You don't see what's different. You only see what repeats. And what repeats, feels like truth. So you start to describe yourself through it. I'm just like this. I always react this way. That's just how I think. That's just how I am. And those sentences feel accurate. Because they match your experience. They match what you see happening. They match what has been consistent. But they don't show you how it formed. They don't show you what came before. They don't show you that. This was built. Not given. You lean back slowly. And the final layer of this chapter settles in. You didn't become this because it was you. You became this because you repeated it until it stopped feeling like a choice. By now, you can see how it formed. How something that started as a response, became a pattern. How repetition turned that pattern into default. And how default, stopped feeling like something you do. And started feeling like something you are. But this is where it goes further. Because once something becomes identity, you don't just act from it. You see through it. That's the shift most people miss. It's not just behavior anymore. It becomes perception. It becomes the way you interpret what's happening, before you even have a chance to question it. You sit there. And it doesn't feel like anything is being filtered. It feels direct. Immediate. Real. Like you're just seeing things as they are. But you're not. You're seeing them through something. And that something, is the pattern you stopped noticing. You lean back slightly. And the distinction sharpens. Once something becomes your lens, you don't see it. You see through it. That line lands differently. Because it removes the distance. It removes the idea that you can easily separate yourself from it. It's not in front of you. It's not something you can point at. It's what you're looking through. So it disappears. Not because it's gone. Because it's integrated. You sit there. And now you can see how it works. Something happens. A conversation. A message. A look. A small shift in tone. And you don't just observe it. You interpret it. Immediately. Automatically. Without checking. The tone feels intentional. The pause feels meaningful. The delay feels like something behind it. The silence feels like a response. And none of that feels like an assumption. It feels like recognition. Like you're picking up on something real. Something subtle. Something that most people would miss. You lean forward slightly. And the mechanism becomes clearer. You're not observing it. You're translating it. Through a structure that already exists. A structure built from repetition. A structure that has learned to expect certain things. To anticipate certain patterns. To fill in gaps before they stay empty. You sit there. And the next layer becomes undeniable. Ambiguity doesn't stay ambiguous. It gets resolved. Quickly. Automatically. Based on what? Your system already knows. Not what's actually there. What feels most consistent with the pattern. So a neutral tone leans negative. A delayed response leans intentional. A pause leans meaningful. And you don't question that shift. Because it feels immediate. It feels correct. It feels like you're reading the situation accurately. You lean back slowly. And the next realization settles in. You don't see the repetition anymore. You only see the result. That's why it's so convincing. Because the process is invisible. All you see is the outcome. The interpretation. The feeling. The reaction. And because you don't see how it was formed, you assume it's real. You assume it's accurate. You assume it's truth. You sit there. And now the system becomes clearer. Perception leads to reaction. Reaction shapes behavior. Behavior creates outcomes. And those outcomes seem to confirm what you already believed. You lean forward again. And the loop sharpens. You interpret something in a certain way. You respond based on that interpretation. Your response creates a specific reaction from the other person. And that reaction fits what you expected. So it feels confirmed. It feels validated. It feels like, I was right. You sit there. And now the reinforcement becomes undeniable. Because the system is closed. It feeds itself. It validates itself. It strengthens itself, without needing anything external to challenge it. You don't need proof. You generate it. Through the way you interpret. Through the way you respond. Through the way your response shapes what happens next. You lean back slightly. And the tension deepens. Because now, it's not just that the pattern exists. It defines your reality. What you see. What you feel. What you believe is happening. And none of it feels constructed. It feels real. Direct. Obvious. You sit there. And the most important layer settles in. You're not observing your pattern. You're operating from it. That line lands clean. Because it removes the illusion of distance. You're not outside of it. You're inside it. Moving through it. Using it to interpret everything around you. Without realizing it. You lean forward again. And now the consequence becomes clear. If your perception is shaped by the pattern, and your reactions come from that perception, then your outcomes will reflect it. And those outcomes will reinforce it. Again. And again. And again. Until it feels undeniable. Until it feels like reality itself is confirming it. You sit there. And now the distortion becomes complete. Not because something changed out there. Because something changed in how you see. And once that changes, everything else follows. You lean back slowly. And the final layer of this chapter settles in. It didn't just change how you react. It changed what you see. And once it changes what you see, you stop questioning it. Because it feels like reality. By now, you can see the lens. You can see how it formed. How it moved from response, to pattern, to default, to something that feels like you. And how once it became that, you stopped seeing it. You started seeing through it. But this is where it goes further. Because once you see through it, it doesn't just shape what you notice. It starts to shape what happens. You sit there. And it begins in a simple way. You interpret something. Not deliberately. Not slowly. Immediately. A tone feels heavier. A pause feels intentional. A delay feels like distance. And that interpretation doesn't stay in your head. It moves into how you respond. You lean forward slightly. And the sequence becomes clearer. Perception leads to response. Response shapes behavior. Behavior influences what happens next. And what happens next is never neutral. Because your response has already shifted the situation. Even in small ways. Subtle ways. Ways that don't stand out. But matter. You sit there. And now the loop becomes visible. You interpret something as distant. So you pull back slightly. You become less open. Less direct. Less available. And the other person responds to that. They adjust. They match your energy. They become slightly more distant too. Not because they intended to. Because they're reacting to you. You lean back slightly. And the next layer lands. Now it looks like confirmation. It looks like, they are distant. I was right. That's what this was. But that's not what happened. What happened is, you saw something through the lens. You responded based on that. Your response changed the situation. And the situation reflected it back to you. You sit there. And the mechanism becomes undeniable. You're not just seeing reality. You're participating in creating the version you see. That line matters. Because it breaks the assumption that everything you experience is independent of you. It isn't. Not completely. Not when your perception is already shaped. Not when your response follows that perception. Not when your response influences the outcome. You lean forward slightly. And now the loop tightens. You interpret. You respond. You get a reaction. That reaction matches your expectation. So it feels confirmed. And that confirmation makes the lens feel more real. More accurate. More trustworthy. You sit there. And now the system becomes self-sustaining. You don't need new evidence. You generate it. Through the way you move. Through the way you interpret. Through the way you respond. And the outcomes keep reinforcing the same pattern. You lean back slowly. And the next layer settles in. It starts to feel like consistency. Like this keeps happening. Like this is how people are. Like this is how situations unfold. Like this is just reality. Because every experience seems to match it. Every interaction seems to confirm it. Every outcome seems to point in the same direction. You sit there. And now the distortion deepens. Because once something feels consistently confirmed, it stops being questioned. It stops being examined. It becomes assumed. It becomes truth. You lean forward again. And the mechanism sharpens. You don't check for alternative explanations. You don't look for other possibilities. You don't pause to ask, is there another way to see this? Because you don't need to. The pattern already feels correct. The evidence already feels clear. The conclusion already feels obvious. You sit there. And now the loop becomes closed. Perception response outcome confirmation. Again. And again. And again. Each cycle reinforcing the last. Each outcome strengthening the lens. Each repetition making it harder to see anything else. You lean back slightly. And the tension builds. Because now, it's not just influencing how you see things. It's limiting what you can see. Anything that doesn't match the pattern, gets filtered out. Minimized. Ignored. Or reinterpreted until it fits. You sit there. And now the most important layer becomes clear. It's not that reality is confirming it. It's that your system is selecting for it. That line lands clean. Because it removes the illusion of objectivity. It removes the idea that, this is just how things are. And replaces it with something harder, this is what keeps getting reinforced. You lean forward again. And the final layer of this chapter settles in. You don't just believe the pattern. You experience it as reality. Because every part of your system, is aligned. To keep it that way. By now, you can see the pattern. You can see how it formed. How it repeated. How it became default. How it turned into something that feels like you. And how once it became that, it started shaping how you see everything. You can see the lens. You can see the loop. You can see the way perception leads to response, and response creates outcomes, and those outcomes seem to confirm it. You can see all of it. And that should change something. It should interrupt the pattern. It should break the loop. It should create distance. But it doesn't. Not automatically. You sit there. And everything is clear. You understand what's happening. You recognize the pattern in real time. You can even name it. This is that same thing. This is that same reaction. This is that same interpretation. And still, it happens. You lean back slightly. And that's where it becomes harder. Because now it's not unconscious. It's visible. And it's still running. You sit there. And the moment unfolds. Something happens. A tone. A pause. A delay. And you can feel the interpretation forming. You can see it. Before it fully locks in. You can feel the shift. The same familiar direction. The same meaning being assigned. And part of you knows, this might not be accurate. This might just be the pattern. But that doesn't stop it. It still lands. It still shapes how you feel. It still influences how you respond. And that's where the confusion begins. Because now you're aware, but not free. You lean forward slightly. And the mechanism becomes clearer. Recognition is not interruption. That line lands hard. Because most people assume, if I can see it, I can stop it. If I understand it, it will change. If I'm aware of it, I won't fall into it. But that's not how this works. Because this wasn't built through thinking. It was built through repetition. And what repetition builds, recognition alone doesn't undo. You sit there. And the next layer becomes undeniable. This pattern doesn't exist at the level of logic. It exists at the level of response. Of timing. Of automatic movement. It happens before reasoning. Before analysis. Before conscious decision. So even when you see it, you're already inside it. You lean back slowly. And the tension deepens. Because now you're experiencing both things at once. The pattern, and the awareness of the pattern. You see it happening. And you feel it happening. At the same time. And they don't cancel each other out. They run in parallel. You sit there. And the next realization settles in. You can't think your way out of something that wasn't built through thinking. That line matters. Because it removes the idea that more analysis will fix it. More clarity. More understanding. More awareness. More insight. All of that helps you see it. But seeing it is not the same as stopping it. You lean forward slightly. And the structure becomes clearer. Repetition built it. Repetition reinforced it. Repetition made it automatic. So what would it take to change it? Not more recognition. Not more analysis. Interruption. Repeated interruption. That's the only thing that matches how it was built. You sit there. And that feels different. Because interruption doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel smooth. It doesn't feel automatic. It feels forced. Uncomfortable. Uncertain. Because you're stepping outside something your system has been relying on. Something that has been keeping things predictable. Keeping things stable. Keeping things controlled. And now you're not following it. Not completely. Not immediately. And that creates friction. You lean back slightly. And the next layer becomes clear. This is why it stays. Not because you don't understand it. Because your system still prefers it. It still trusts it. It still sees it as the safest way to move. Even if it's not accurate. Even if it's not helping. Even if it's limiting you. It's familiar. And familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. You sit there. And now the identity layer locks in fully. Because this pattern isn't just something you use. It's something you've been using long enough to trust. To rely on. To default to. And that makes it harder to interrupt. Harder to step outside of. Harder to question in real time. You lean forward again. And the final layer settles in. Seeing it is the beginning. Not the end. Because until something interrupts it, it continues. Until something breaks the repetition, it reinforces itself. Until something changes in how you respond, it keeps defining what you see. You sit there. And now the truth becomes unavoidable. It doesn't stop because you understand it. It stops when you stop reinforcing it. Nothing about this changes all at once. There's no moment where everything suddenly resets. No clear line between who you were and who you are now. Because that's not how this formed. It didn't happen all at once. It didn't arrive fully built. It didn't replace you. It built itself, through repetition. Quietly. Gradually. Without asking. Without being questioned. And because of that, it never felt separate. It never felt like something you picked up. Something you learned. Something you adapted. It just felt like you. You sit there. And now you can see it. Not as identity. As pattern. Not as who you are. As something you've been repeating for a long time. And that shift changes where this is. Because if it was built through repetition, then it doesn't need to be undone all at once. It just needs to stop being continued. You lean back slightly. And the moment becomes smaller. More precise. Not about your whole identity. Not about everything you are. Just about this. This one pattern. This one reaction. This one way of interpreting something before it fully happens. And you can feel it now. The moment it starts. The exact point where your system moves first. Before your awareness. Before your decision. Before you choose anything. That's where it lives. You sit with that. And it doesn't feel like a big decision. It feels like something subtle. Almost invisible. A slight shift. A direction your mind begins to take. And normally, you follow it. Automatically. Without stopping. Without noticing. Because that's what you've always done. That's what has been repeated. That's what has been reinforced. But now, you can see it. Before you fully step into it. You lean forward slightly. And the tension sharpens. Because now it's not unconscious. It's right there. At the beginning. And you can feel both options. Follow it. Or not. That's it. No complexity. No layers. No deep analysis. Just continuation, or interruption. You sit there. And the familiar path is still strong. It hasn't weakened. It hasn't disappeared. It still feels natural. Still feels immediate. Still feels like the easiest direction to go. And that's the point. Because nothing about this changes by itself. The pattern doesn't fade just because you noticed it. It doesn't dissolve just because you understood it. It stays. Until something interrupts it. You lean back slowly. And the next layer settles in. Interruption doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like friction. It feels like stopping something mid-motion. It feels like not finishing what your mind started. And that's uncomfortable. Because you're stepping out of something that has been consistent. Reliable. Predictable. Even if it hasn't been accurate. Even if it hasn't been helpful. It's been stable. And now, you're not following it. You sit there. And for a moment, nothing replaces it. No new pattern. No new reaction. No new identity. Just space. Just the absence of what would have happened next. And that can feel wrong. Like you're missing something. Like you didn't complete something. Like you left something unfinished. But you didn't. You just didn't repeat it. That's the difference. You lean forward slightly. And the final layer settles in. This was never something you had to remove. Never something you had to destroy. Never something you had to fight. It was something you had to stop continuing. Because what isn't repeated, doesn't stay. What isn't reinforced, doesn't define you. You sit there. And the identity shifts again. Not into something new. But away from something old. Away from something that only existed because it kept being run. And without repetition, it doesn't hold. It doesn't stabilize. It doesn't feel like default anymore. It just weakens. Slowly. Quietly. Without needing anything dramatic. You lean back. And the final line settles in. It didn't become you. You became what you kept repeating. And it stops, when you stop continuing it.